I'm making this video because a friend of mine showed some interest in this, and she didn't specifically request me to make this video, but she said she would be interested if I did so. Not in so many words, but I thought, why not? It'll also help me to get my own head around this a little bit better, maybe. But without further ado, let's just get to business. The topic under discussion is a topic of belief versus knowledge, and atheism versus agnosticism. Is there an overlap between the two? How do they overlap? Or are they mutually exclusive? Can you be one or the other or both? What's the story here? And in order to help you understand how I think it works, let me show you this diagram here. Now in this diagram I'm presenting you with 4 questions. 2 questions about belief and 2 questions about knowledge. Now first of all, the difference between knowledge and belief. In my opinion, knowledge is that which you think you can state and verify for yourself at the very least, if not something that you can explain to somebody else so they can verify it for themselves. That's what I would consider knowledge. And on the other hand, belief, which is something that you have decided for yourself is true, possibly on the back of some evidence, but also possibly for emotional or other reasons that may not necessarily be as rational. And still, if you look at the questions, you'll see that I've given you the option to answer each of the questions with either yes or no. And that might seem at first as if I'm introducing a lot of redundancy into this picture. Now I am of course introducing some redundancy here. For example, if you answer yes to the question, do you believe that there is a God? Then you would necessarily answer no to the question, do you believe that there is no God? But you could answer no to both questions. And that is how you would answer if you actually weren't sure. You didn't feel you were in a position to make up your mind over this. Then you would have to answer no to the first question, and you would have to answer no to the second question. You cannot state belief in either of those questions. The same goes for knowledge. Now if we look at this diagram, first of all, are there any areas in this diagram where you basically shouldn't go? Places that just don't make sense. Places that I would label as cognitive dissonance. Yes, there are. Here are the points where you would get cognitive dissonance. If you feel that you could verify for yourself, if you feel that you're certain that there is a God, to then answer the question, do you believe that there is a God, with no, simply makes no sense. And similarly, answering the question, do you believe that there is no God, with yes, if you feel that you can verify for yourself that there is a God, simply doesn't add up. If you declare yourself to be in that position, then I would call you cognitively dissonant. You're just contradicting yourself, basically. It's not always as straightforward as that. Look at this one, for example. If you should be able to verify for yourself that God doesn't exist, and instead you keep on insisting that you believe that God does exist, then you are still presenting an image of cognitive dissonance. But there are plenty of examples of people like that. For example, Nephilim free. Now, I'm going to get back to that later, about why I feel Nephilim free knows that there is no God. But I'll get to that later. And similarly, if you say that you know that there is no God, and then if somebody asks you, do you believe that there is no God, and you say no, that makes no sense either. So then, let's see where labels such as agnosticism and atheism fit into this picture. Well, agnosticism is a position, in some cases, that knowledge about God is unknowable, as strong as that, but at the very least, the position that we don't know. So in other words, an agnostic, when looking at this grid here, would always find themselves answering no to the questions on the left hand side. Not necessarily to the questions at the top. So this is where you find agnosticism. I'm going to go into details later. Now, let's move on to atheism. Atheism falls within the context of not believing that there is a God. Now that would be consistent with answering no to the question, do you believe that there is a God? So it's definitely the second column. And it can be strengthened to the point where it includes the third column. So this is where you would find atheism. So you can see that the two aren't the same, obviously. But also equally clearly, there is a certain amount of overlap. And this is how I see the bigger picture. When we're looking at this image, we'll see the full picture, where we can see how atheism and agnosticism overlap, where they don't overlap, and what I would consider each of the positions to represent. For example, the person who would answer no to do you know that there is a God, but who answers yes to the question do you believe that there is a God, would be somebody that I would call an agnostic theist. Other variations of this are people who say that they do believe that there is a God. They might even feel that they know that there is a God, but who claim things like that God's nature is unknowable. And of course the most extreme example of that would be a deist. These people would probably also answer no to the question, do you know that there is no God? They would say no, of course not. And they would probably be a bit more adamant than answering no to the question, do you know that there is a God? But both of these positions are consistent with the agnostic theist position. On the far right, you have the other extreme, the person that I would call the professional fence-sitting agnostic. They will never answer yes to any question. They will certainly not deny the existence of God. They will certainly not claim that they know that there is a God or that there is no God. They would always deny any knowledge about anything. But moving towards the middle, you would get the atheistic positions, and at the top and the bottom you would get those positions that are compatible with agnosticism. The person who answers truthfully no to the question, do you know that there is a God, but who also says, listen, I don't believe that there is a God, would be somebody who would probably be quite comfortable with the label agnostic atheist. And that could go even further. They could say, well, looking around me and looking at all the evidence, I really see no need to believe in any God, to the point where I think there simply isn't one. I believe there isn't a God, even though I can't be 100% sure. That would be a positive agnostic atheist. These people would also probably answer no to the question, do you know that there is no God? But they might be a bit more wishy-washy about that. And then you have people who simply answer yes to the question, do you know that there is no God? These people are positive atheists, and they would naturally answer no to the question, do you believe that there is a God? And yes to the question, do you believe that there is no God? They know that there is no God. They are certain that there is no God. For them, the question is moot. These people are positive atheists. I would call myself a positive atheist, even though, depending on how the question is phrased, my answer might move a little bit out of this light blue area in the middle. It very much depends on who I'm talking to. When I am talking to your average theist, and that is most of the time where the question about the existence of a God comes up, is in discussion with a theist, you will be talking to somebody who must present to you a coherent concept of what they believe God is. This is something that I always find extremely frustrating when talking to a theist. They assume that I have a God concept. I don't. To me, the word God is a meaningless three-letter combination. And that's why when I'm talking to somebody, if we are to talk about the existence of God, the only way we can do so constructively, since I don't have a concept of what God is meant to be, we will have to adopt their concept. In other words, when you're talking to a Christian, you will have to adopt the Christian God concept. When you're talking about to a Muslim, you have to adopt the Muslim God concept. And this is why I call myself a positive atheist, because I know for a fact that those gods don't exist. I'm quite happy to move into the purple areas on this screen, even as far as professional fence-sitting agnostic, when we start redefining the word God as something that could just possibly be out there and that could just possibly be responsible for the reality that we experience. Sure, but we're not talking about any gods that any Christian or Muslim or any other theist that I've ever met would believe in. So by and large, I present myself as being squarely in the light blue area of this picture, because that's how a theist would best understand my position. I hope that helps explain the way I understand this, and I hope that helps you get a better grip of why we make such distinctions. Oh yeah, the thing about Nephilim 3. Yes, this is again about where I'm coming from, and he should know that especially the caricature of the Christian God that he believes in is utterly impossible. And I think that if he's intellectually honest with himself, he knows that. So the God that he presents to us is a God that he himself cannot even seriously believe exists. And therefore, I think it's reasonable to state that Nephilim 3 knows that there is no God. And yet, he keeps insisting that he believes that there is. And that's why he falls in this particular area of cognitive dissonance. And on that note, I say good night.